All right, hello everyone. We're going to get started. Today I'm going to go over the Academy curriculum and the changes we've made. So I'll talk a little bit about the new classification model that we have, our courses, some of our prerequisites for those courses, and our general scheduling process. I'll try to go over or provide a bit of an overview of each of the different courses that we have. So I'll try to get through that as quickly as possible, but also kind of try to make it as informative as I can. So we'll just kind of start with kind of why we're doing this and what kind of caused us to make these changes. So we received a lot of different feedback and we've also done a bit of an internal review. So we previously had this model where we used conventions for fundamentals, level 1 and level 2, but this was not as straightforward as it could be. So we realized it was creating a lot of confusion. This was kind of a legacy system in place for many years, but we've since decided to revise it in order to kind of clarify how this is now set up. So prerequisites, course descriptions, and often the degree of difficulty as well. It was not very clear because level 2 did not necessarily mean it was harder than a level 1 course, and this also created some confusion, I believe. So based on this, we have reviewed the structure and the categorizations for our courses and made some changes. We've also revised our scheduling process so that we are kind of attempting to make things available earlier. And we'll just discuss some of this in this presentation. So we'll start with just going over the new classification model that we're using. Then we'll discuss the target audiences, and we've attempted to make some standardization around this using something we call a core team concept, and I'll discuss that in a moment. We'll then go through a kind of lightning round of a breakdown of our courses by the classification. So there's a number of different courses that we have, and we'll just kind of break those down real quick. And then just to end the presentation today, we'll talk about the new scheduling process. All right, so let's start with the new classification model. So the new classification model is going to replace our previous system of using our levels. So previously we had fundamentals, level 1, and level 2 to kind of separate our course offerings, with kind of learning paths determining the degree of difficulty for a particular course. But as I mentioned, there were some issues with the way this was classified, and we believe this was creating quite a bit of confusion as well. So we wanted to revise this in order to kind of make things a bit more clear, and also so people have an understanding of how they're progressing through the different courses, as well as a bit of a better separation between the courses that we do offer. So instead of using level 1 and level 2 and fundamentals, we're not going to be using those anymore. So we have replaced that whole system with 6 classifications. So we start with the Intro to DHIS2 classification, and we'll go over all the courses and what's involved in each of these categories in a moment. We then have the DHIS2 Use category. We have the DHIS2 Configuration category, Domain and Program Management, Architecture and Extensions, and Conferences. So in this first category, the Intro to DHIS2 course, this has one course within the category itself. And we've separated this out because more or less anyone who's new to DHIS2 or wants to learn about DHIS2, we recommend that they take this course. So it's kind of our most broad-reaching course. And in terms of a prerequisite, it's also kind of one of our most common prerequisites for a number of our courses. So it's its own category now, and we've just separated that off. And this is the online self-paced course that you can access on our online academy website. We then have a number of other categories that consist of many different courses. So the first category here we have is DHIS2 Use. So you'll see the courses listed. The purple kind of courses are ones that are online, okay, self-paced online courses. And then the white ones, the white text in that green box, those are the in-person courses. And that's the same throughout the remainder of this presentation. So in this DHIS2 Use category, we focus on kind of utilizing DHIS2. There's a heavy focus on data entry and kind of creating data outputs or reporting outputs within the system itself. So for the most part, in this DHIS2 use category, we don't really talk about performing maintenance tasks or configuration tasks. It's kind of actually interacting with DHIS2 after it's already been configured for someone to utilize it. And in this category, we have a number of courses. So we start with our two online courses, aggregate data capture and validation, aggregate data analysis, and we'll describe each of these courses in a moment. Visualizing data in DHIS2, tracker data capture and analysis, maps and geographic data, and data quality. So all of these focus on utilizing features that are already in DHIS2, using configurations that are already available to you, more on the data entry and analysis side of things. The next category we have is our DHIS2 configuration category. So configuration courses work on utilizing the maintenance application to perform various system administration tasks. So there's a lot of different ways you can set up DHIS2. There's ways you can extend it. You can use scripts. You can use the API. You can use apps or other tools. That's out of scope for this particular category. However, we have a new category that addresses those challenges as well. So we're really focusing on utilizing the user interface within DHIS2 to configure DHIS2 in this category. Okay. So the courses we have here are aggregate customization. That's our online course. Events Fundamentals, which is also one of the online courses we offer. And then we have a couple of different courses available here that focus on using the maintenance app to perform a variety of different tasks, optimizing data access and outputs, tracker configuration, and Android configuration. And once again, we'll describe what all these courses are in a moment. Okay. The fifth category we have here is domain and program management. So this category focuses on two connected areas. So we have domain management. So this looks at how DHIS2 can function as kind of an information system within a particular domain or sector. So examples of this are DHIS2 for education, for logistics, community health. Okay? And then interlinked with that is program management. And this focuses much more on strategic aspects of managing the implementation. So budgeting, governance, capacity building, scaling up the implementation over time. And that's more kind of targeted for program managers, subject matter experts, others who might be involved in kind of the day-to-day management of implementing DHIS2. So the one course that we do have that's online in this category is our planning and budgeting DHIS2 implementations. The remainder of the courses that you see here are all in person. Another category that we have is our architecture and extensions category, okay? So this focuses on a variety of basically supplementary processes and tools that support a DHIS2 implementation. So what I mean by that is if you can't use the maintenance app, or if doing something outside of DHIS2 to kind of manage the system is more appropriate, then that's where the classification kind of holds true here. So we have courses that focus on introducing the API. We have courses that focus on supporting servers, on supporting kind of integration between DHIS2 and other systems in this category. So this is basically the category for, anything where you're not necessarily just using the features built in directly through the DHIS2 user interface. Okay? So this is also our most kind of IT-centric category, I would say. So you do require some skills in IT. You might need some knowledge of some specific tool or technical framework in order to be successful in these courses. And we will go over that for the prerequisites for each of these courses. And the last category we have is conferences, right? So we have the annual conference in Oslo. There's been a conference in Asia the past couple of years. The education sector has also been having a conference as part of their annual academies. And there's also discussion about having these in other regions and places as we're kind of evolving our program. So the whole idea with these conferences is much more about kind of information sharing and networking. So this is one of the areas where we're not necessarily focusing on hands-on training necessarily, right? So we don't have demonstrations and hands-on exercises. It's much more about kind of information sharing and getting others to share their experiences so we can learn from them. All right, so all that being said, so we have these 6 categories now, and in order to kind of cater to certain audiences, we've developed profiles more or less to kind of standardize our approach to selecting our target audiences. So in order to do this, and maybe you've heard this concept before, maybe not, okay, but we've kind of just really defined what our concept of a DHIS2 core team is. And why we've done this and why it's related to the kind of academy work is because we intend to use these roles to identify who our target audience is for each academy and which courses we think that they should take. So just a quick introduction to this concept, so we're all on the same page as we're going through the remainder of the presentation. So DHIS2 core teams are the teams that manage the DHIS2 implementation daily. And they don't have to be large in size, they'll vary kind of based on the context where DHIS2 is being implemented. So I have 4 to 6 people here, but it's generally different depending on the size of the implementation. But it's not meant to be a huge team, is kind of the main point that I'm trying to get across. So there are 4 core positions that we've identified and 4 contributing roles that we believe are important for core team development. So I'm just going to go over the core roles, just so you have a bit of an idea of what they are, okay? And then we have these contributory roles as well, which are a little bit more self-explanatory. So these core roles are operational lead, trainer, implementer, and server administrator, okay? You will see this contributing roles come up as well: subject matter expert, program manager, app developer, and security manager. Those are fairly self-explanatory, but I'll provide a bit of background as we go through the presentation as well. So the whole idea behind this is to use these profiles to select or at least inform you of our intended target audience for this. We also have a number of tools that actually help in kind of documenting what a core team looks like, and that is something we'll be releasing a bit later on. And so people can actually follow up with people, assign people in their team certain roles, and then evaluate their learning outcomes. You know, did they actually learn what they're supposed to after they attended the academy, you know, based on the learning path that has been defined, you know, for them. So we want to make sure there's a bit more follow-up for the intended audience, and that, you know, they don't just leave the academy and there's no next steps. There's no kind of sequence for them to kind of continue to expand their knowledge. So the 4 roles we have here, the first role is the operational lead. So this is kind of like a team lead of the core team. So they are the project manager of the daily operations of DHIS2 implementations. And they work with the internal and external partners, and they're kind of responsible for making sure that it fits in with a broader kind of HIS ecosystem, right? So you could have other systems, other tools, whatever it might be. You know, DHIS2 shouldn't really conflict with that process. So this person will have background in DHIS2. They're not just a kind of manager without any specific skills in DHIS2. They kind of have to bridge that divide. Okay. We have a trainer then, who's also another position here, and they lead the development of training material, documentation, job aids, etc. Okay. They provide both training of trainers as well as end user training, and they have knowledge of both kind of fundamental concepts as well as advanced concepts. So, you know, you could be training someone one day to do data entry, and then maybe the other day you're working on building a tracker program, right? So they have a range of skills here as well. You have an implementer. These are the people that have maybe the most diverse role within the implementation. So they lead the requirements gathering and configuration process. They develop a number of solutions to actually implement them in DHIS2, you know, helping on the configuration, helping with integration with other systems, etc. Okay. And then the server administrator. So the server administrator manages the server, all the operations of upgrading DHIS2, upgrading the operating system on the server, using performance monitoring tools to make sure the health of the server is, you know, correct, and perform some of those operations. So these are the core roles that we've identified on top of those contributory roles that we've also outlined. So within this, what we'll do is use these roles in order to identify the intended target audience for our academies, okay? So you will see this now in our academy announcements. So if I just show you real quick. This is one of our recent Academy announcements. And if you look on the registration page, it'll have a participant's profile. And within that profile, you will see that we use the terminology of the roles that I've just defined right now. So we see the target audience, we have the roles listed, we have a description of those roles, including one of the contributory roles defined here as well. So this is kind of how we'll be going forward, standardizing our process to make it clear who our intended audience is. We'll also be promoting that countries identify people to actually fit in with these roles, so we can perform follow-up activities with them, so the countries can monitor their progress, and so that the countries just have developed some type of responsibility framework for who's actually doing what within their DHIS2 implementation, and then there's learning sequences and learning pathways that are clearly defined for each of those individuals. And that's not just academies, of course, that's other types of training, but academies is a part of that. Okay. And what we've also done to support this further is to develop an interactive learning pathway tool for each of these roles. So what we do within that tool is outline all the different courses or types of training that we think that those roles should have. So I'll just open this up. Okay, so the link is in the presentation. We'll make sure to share that with you again. So you can see here those same roles that I've defined as my intended target audience for the different academies are listed on this page. So if I select one of these roles, let's say operational lead, okay, to give me a role overview, right, a description of that role, the recommended courses that they should take, and optional courses that they should take. And they're separated into the same categories that I've defined earlier, okay? And then if I want to see a description of one of the courses, I can just select one of the courses. It'll give me an overview, some of the topics that are included, the prerequisites, and the kind of modality of delivery, self-paced or in-person, etc. As well as kind of a link if relevant to the Academy material, okay? So this is one way to kind of help define those roles in your own context and give you an idea of what types of courses or what types of skills the person should have. And the idea is not necessarily to always send them to an academy necessarily, because you can, of course, do in-country trainings related to the same topic. So, for example, if you wanted to do a data quality training, you could do that in country and have someone learn those specific skills if that was relevant to them, okay? So hopefully this helps everyone kind of negotiate how they're going to set up individuals for success within their own countries, and also kind of build roles with defined learning paths, defined learning sequences that they can go through so they can kind of understand, what are the different types of operations they should consider working with in DHIS2. All right, so what I'm going to do now is just go through a quick overview of each of our courses. So I'll go through each category and then define each of the courses within that category. Now, I'm not going to discuss the Intro to DHIS2 category because that's just one course, okay? The Introduction to DHIS2 online course, and we've kind of defined that earlier, right? So basically anyone who wants to learn about DHIS2 doesn't really know what it is, they should start there, right? And we recommend that course, on a wide-reaching basis, I would say, okay? So for the first kind of category beyond that, we have this DHIS2 Use category, which focuses on, mostly data entry and analysis of our data. So we'll start with the aggregate data capture and validation fundamentals. So this is an online course, and that's why the title here is in this purple color, okay? So any courses with the purple color here will be the online courses that we offer, okay? So this discusses kind of the fundamental concepts for aggregate data entry and data validation. So both using the web-based DHIS2 tools, as well as Android devices to collect data, okay? So the target audience is also listed, and we're once again using those roles that we've defined. And this is also defined within the learning pathway that we've set. So we have the operational lead, the implementer, and the trainer involved, or who we'd recommend this to, okay? And the prerequisites are just the Intro to DHIS2 course. A quick note on our prerequisites. So while we recommend courses to take, that doesn't mean you have to complete those courses. If you have relevant knowledge, okay, that would be similar to what's in that course, you don't need to take that course again. Okay, so if you already know what DHIS2 is, you already know what it's about. Well, in this case, you would still have to take it, but for some of our other courses, so for example, some of our advanced courses where there's other requirements, we'll discuss that in a moment. You don't necessarily always have to take the prerequisite course. The Intro to DHIS2 course, however, is quite short, and we do suggest, or I think it is required for many of our, to access our online courses. Okay? So in this aggregate data capture and validation fundamentals, we have a number of learning objectives. So just discusses the types of data that DHIS2 supports, goes through data entry, both web and Android, shows you how to enter data offline, both web and Android, run validation rules, complete a data set, use the data quality app to perform validation, and use the reports app to generate items like reporting rate summaries and other types of reports. We then have our aggregate data analysis fundamentals, right? So this looks more at creating data outputs. So there's a number of exercises that we include here on the core DHIS2 applications. And this is a fundamentals level course, so you're just getting an introduction. You're opening up Data Visualizer, reviewing the interface, creating a chart, creating a table, etc. Okay, and it's kind of giving some background in terms of how to utilize those features. So the target audience for this academy is the operational lead, implementer, trainer. SME is short for subject matter expert. Okay, so a subject matter expert is one of the contributory roles. We didn't define it earlier, but this is basically someone who understands their, let's say, health program or education program or whichever specific program they're working on. You know, this could be someone who understands the indicators that are involved in that program, understands how services are delivered within a school or within a health facility for that program. Okay, so someone who really understands the actual program itself, because it could be useful for them to understand how to build outputs in DHIS2. And then we have program managers. So this could be, for example, a director of the HIV program, for example, who's managing that program and responsible for kind of the final outputs and reporting the progress of that program on a daily basis. Okay. So in this course, we're looking at working with visualizations. So we build pivot tables, maps, charts, and dashboards. Okay, and it's an introduction to a lot of these concepts, and it's built on further in another course that I'll discuss in a moment. Okay, the next course we have is visualizing data in DHIS2. So this course used to previously be called Analytics Tools. All right. Now with this course, we're building on what we discussed in kind of that visualization fundamentals here, the aggregate data analysis fundamentals that we previously discussed. Okay, so we have a focus here on the core analytics tools, same thing, data visualizer, maps, dashboards, and making pivot tables. However, we're going into much more detail here, discussing a lot of the other types of visualizations that you can create and some of the extra features that are available to visualize data in DHIS2. Okay, so we're getting into a lot more detail for each of these specific tools and going over basically more, you know, all the different types of visualizations you can create, all the different options that are available within this applications that are used to make these visualizations as well. So the target audience for this is the operational leads, implementers, trainers, subject matter experts, and program managers. So same as that previous course, right? The prerequisites are the introduction to DHIS2 course. And actually, sorry, I should add one more here that the online course is also needed. The aggregate data analysis course is also needed for this one. I'll have to modify this. Okay, so it's important to note that the kind of difference between these two, right, is that so the difference between this one here, which is our online course, this is the introduction, right? And it goes over the interfaces, it goes over how to create various items. And then we have this secondary step, which discusses kind of more detail on how to use these apps. It gives a lot more information in the various options that are available and how to utilize them to create all kinds of different outputs. Okay, the next course we have is Tracker Data Capture and Analysis Fundamentals. So this previously used to be called Tracker Use, but we've given it a new name, okay? So for anyone who was kind of aware of the course name before, just keep that in mind. So in this Tracker Data Capture and Analysis Fundamentals course, what we're doing is focusing on utilizing the tracker features for basically data capture and analysis of tracker data. So we give a kind of breakdown of the tracker data model. There's an overview of all the different features that are available, and then, discusses how tracker data can be captured and then analyzed as well. Okay. So we have a target audience here of the operational lead, implementer, and trainer. The prerequisites are the Events Fundamentals course. Now, we haven't covered that course yet, but I'll talk about that in a moment. And the learning objectives for this course, we describe the latest tracker features, the data model as well. You're looking at how data can be captured in both web and Android. You also identify the various applications that can be used to analyze tracker data, and then create a number of different outputs for analyzing that data. There are a lot of kind of considerations when analyzing tracker data specifically. So one of the items that it does build on, this visualizing data in DHIS2 course does include many concepts that would be associated with reviewing, information from a case-based system, but we don't actually go into some of the details that signify specifically what that is in this course. So while this is applicable to both aggregate and tracker models, in this course, we kind of define those tracker models in much more detail. We're utilizing some specific apps and tools that we don't discuss in the visualizing data in DHIS2 course. And we're also discussing some of the, models in tracker a bit more. So, how do you look at data that's in a repeated stage? How do you look at data that's across multiple events, for example? These are all specific to tracker, and we discuss those in this course here. Okay, so the next course we have is Maps and Geographic Data. So in this course, we're looking at using maps within DHIS2, but we're also looking at how this integrates with other GIS software. And the one we use is QGIS as an example, but ArcGIS is another one that it can be integrated with. But for the purposes of our course, we're focusing on QGIS because it is another free system that you can download. The target audience for this are our implementers and our trainers, and our prerequisites for this particular course are the visualizing data in DHIS2 course. So that means any prerequisites prior to that are also needed. So you would also have to have the skills that you've learned in the aggregate data analysis fundamentals course as well. So our learning objectives for this course are to, one, understand how geodata can fit into our country needs and existing planning processes, to demonstrate an understanding and use of the latest map features, understand available geocore data and population data layers in DHIS2, produce maps for decision-making at various government levels, both in DHIS2, and then also showing you how to export data from DHIS2 to use in QGIS. We also show you how to connect with Google Earth Engine to add external layers, and also printing maps, printing large maps for facilities. So if you want a large printout on your wall, for example, we show that as well. Okay, so there's a number of learning objectives specific here to maps. So it builds on this visualizing data in DHIS2 course and the aggregate data analysis fundamentals course, because in those courses where we do discuss maps, there are dedicated sessions for maps. Here we're having kind of a dedicated session where we're talking about how the DHIS2 maps integrates with kind of the larger the larger GIS kind of, community that's available there, and some of the advanced features that are leveraged through access of, exporting this data out, in addition to adding external connections, for example, with Google Earth Engine within DHIS2. Okay, The next course within this DHIS2 Use category is data quality. Now, this is currently an online course. However, a new version of this data quality course for in-person attendance is currently being developed as we're changing a lot of the guidance around data quality at the moment. So we'll have more information and updates on that once it's available. So at the moment, this is an online course, and we review how data quality can be reviewed using a number of different tools. So we look at the WHO data quality tool. We look at validation rule analysis, creating notifications in the data quality app. We also look at some of the features for individual data as well in order to check quality at the point of data entry. We examine some of the processes and practices associated with data capture that impact data quality. And we show people how to install and configure the WHO data quality tool. Okay. So for this course, we have a number of target audiences that we suggest. And you'll see here that there's this optional, there's a star that beside some of their names. So what we mean by that is it's dependent on the context of your implementation to some degree. Okay. So what we recommend, for example, implementers and trainers take this course. A subject matter expert or a program manager, it might be good for them to take this course depending on their role, right? How it's defined within your system. Okay. And in order to take this course, the prerequisite for this is the Visualizing Data in DHIS2 course. Okay, so those are the categories those are the courses within our DHIS2 Use category. Okay, so that's how we separated things off. We no longer have level 1 and level 2 items referring to that. So within those course structures that we've previously discussed, some of those courses used to be called level 2, some of those were previously level 1, some of them were fundamentals. But we've got rid of those levels and now we put them in those categories. Okay. So the next category we have is DHIS2 Configuration. And once again, this category focuses more on utilizing the maintenance app to perform various system administration tasks. Okay, the first course we have is our Aggregate Customization Fundamentals course. So this looks at kind of the fundamental concepts for the design and customization of aggregate systems. Okay. So you're using the maintenance application to build organization units, data elements, data element disaggregations, data sets, indicators, and a bit of user access as well. Okay. So the prerequisites for this are the Intro to DHIS2 course, and our target audience, the operational lead, is kind of optional. It depends on kind of what they're working on and how you define that role. Once again, the implementer, trainer, and security expert. Okay. The security expert is another role that we haven't really talked about. It's another contributory role. This particular role is kind of focusing on security of the DHIS2 system. There's a number of security protocols and guidance that we've developed. There's a number of frameworks and tools that are available for security experts. And we're also looking at building out some guidance on audits for performing security audits within DHIS2. So the security expert would kind of make sure to take care of all of that. They might not be involved in the implementation full time, but you would kind of lean on them when you need some advice. And, because they might be supporting multiple sectors, for example, but you would lean on them when you need them to provide some input for your specific implementation. Our next course in this DHIS2 configuration category is Events Fundamentals. This is another online course. In this course, we're reviewing event data. So we're looking at the collection of data, we're looking at the analysis of that data, and we're also looking at the configuration of event programs. So within this course, we try to explain how event data is collected, right? Define the event data model. And this is kind of where, the event data model is kind of our intermediary between the aggregate data and the tracker data that we have within DHIS2. Okay? So we look at also analyzing this data and creating an actual event program in DHIS2. Okay. So at the moment, it's all one large course that includes the data capture, data analysis, and configuration components within it. But in the future, this will be modified to be split up into similar categories like our aggregate fundamentals courses where we have three kind of streams for data entry and capture, for data analysis, and then for configuration. So it won't be lumped together the way it is now. Okay. The target audience for this is, once again, we have our operational lead. This is optional for them. The implementer, trainer, and security expert. And there's a number of prerequisites, basically all the aggregate fundamentals courses, and also the intro to DHIS2, which would precede that, right? So data capture and validation, data analysis, and customization. All right, so our next course here is called Optimizing Data Access and Outputs. This is an in-person course, not an online course. This was previously called Design for Data Use. Now, with this course focuses on the configuration of aggregate metadata, but it has a focus on configuring that metadata with the end user in mind in terms of how they're going to access that data. Okay, so what we look at and while it builds upon the aggregate customization course, okay, we're kind of going back and forth between data visualizations in DHIS2 and maintenance and the maintenance application to discuss how you can configure your system to make sure you facilitate easier data access for the various users that are accessing your system on a routine basis. So we go through a lot of best practice design here, and how it builds on that fundamentals customization course is now we're not just kind of going around and showing you, how to do a specific task, but we're getting into why you do things in a specific way. We're also discussing advanced concepts regarding the configuration of those various areas, looking at, what are the effects of configuring something in a certain way over a long period of time. Maybe when you start, your system is small, but if you keep doing things in a certain way as your system grows, that could have a potential negative effect. So we look at kind of all the different kind of viewpoints of making, a sustainable information system that's robust and lasts a long time in this particular course. All right, our next course is Tracker Configuration Fundamentals. So in this course, we focus on actually configuring a tracker program. So this is kind of, we have just added the fundamentals tag to this course because we're looking at potentially introducing advanced tracker configuration concepts in the future. And we also wanted to clearly let people know that this is kind of a starting point for learning about tracker configuration. So while we go into details of creating a program, adding to that program by creating things like program indicators and program rules, looking at user management specifically for tracker programs, sharing for tracker programs, there is a lot more that can be learned after this course, right? So tracker configuration is one of our more complex kind of implementation configurations inside of DHIS2. And because of this, after leaving this course, you'll get an appreciation for how things are done, but chances are you're going to have to learn more after this to really kind of meet your program's requirements, depending on the needs of what you're doing. Okay, so the target audience for this course is operational leads, implementers, and trainers, and the prerequisites for this are the tracker data capture and analysis fundamentals. So that also assumes you've taken event fundamentals and the aggregate fundamentals courses. Now, of course, once again, as I mentioned, if you have kind of similar knowledge or skills, then you don't need to go through and take all those courses, but that's just meant for people who don't have the necessary background. But if you understand how tracker works, or if you've been kind of entering and analyzing data and know how to make some of the aggregate metadata, for example, then you wouldn't necessarily need to go through all the courses that are associated with the learning pathway to get here. Okay. Okay, our next course in this category is called Android Configuration, and this looks at specifically how you would modify programs or data sets and the analysis of that data to work well on a mobile device. So this does assume that you have background knowledge in working with tracker programs and working with aggregate data sets in configuring those aggregate data sets and programs. So there is a bit of a learning pathway here to get to the Android configuration course, because there's a lot of assumptions that you have background skills in configuring a tracker program and in configuring an aggregate data set, in making charts, in making maps in DHIS2 already. And then the whole idea with this course is to bring that all together and show you how you can optimize a mobile device, modify the configuration, and also create various types of outputs that you can place on the mobile device for, let's say, offline data analysis or online data analysis, depending on, the configuration that you have and how the user is interacting with that mobile device on a routine basis. So for the target audience here, we have the operational lead, implementer, and trainer. We put it optional for them because, once again, this is dependent on the context. If you don't have an Android active Android implementation occurring, this might not be relevant for anyone in your setting. But of course, if you're planning an Android implementation or if you have one already, then this is very relevant for that audience. So it's context dependent, situational dependent, but we do recommend this course for people that are kind of working with Android on a regular basis or have plans to do so in the future. So in this course, we go over the latest Android app features. We show you how to enter aggregate data and individual data, tracker data within the Android app, show you how to use charts and maps offline for data analysis on the Android app itself, demonstrate how to modify data sets and programs, in particular their data collection through the use of visual elements. So, we're actually taking existing data sets and programs and modifying them. So that's why that assumption is that you know already how to modify or create data sets and programs there. Okay, and then there's a number of Android settings and updates. We also describe some of the implementation considerations for kind of implementing Android, and then describe some of the Android release cycles and roadmaps so you can kind of plan around that within your own implementation. Okay, so those are all the categories within the DHIS2 configuration categorization. Okay, the next category we have is domain and program management. And this is the category that was kind of split between these two connected areas, domain management and program management. So domain management is focusing on, how DHIS2 can work within a specific sector, like education or health. And program management is looking at more at, how you manage the DHIS2 implementation. You don't necessarily require a lot of DHIS2 background, and we'll discuss that as we go through these courses. So the first course we have is Planning and Budgeting DHIS2 Implementations. This is an online course, okay? What we discuss in this particular course is looking at kind of, how you manage DHIS2 to be a sustainable implementation over time. So we're looking at areas like planning and budgeting, governance, capacity building, okay? The different roles required to manage an implementation, infrastructure requirements, different needs depending on how you're collecting that data. And it's a kind of an introduction to some of these concepts. So in this course, we kind of discuss some of the main features we have that have made DHIS2 successful. We discuss the different roles and responsibilities of DHIS2 teams. So there's more information on that core team concept I presented earlier, on top of a number of other concepts related to budgeting, governance, etc. Okay. And we identify some of the main activities and best practices, when you're kind of trying to implement a large-scale system that functions over a large period of time. So the prerequisites for this are just our Intro to DHIS2 course. There's no real expectation to know a lot about the different features that are available or about how to configure something specific in DHIS2. We have the target audience here, the operational lead, the implementer, where once again, this is optional depending on the context, and program managers. So for this particular course, we don't necessarily require a lot of DHIS2 specific skills. It's much more about kind of thinking about it from a long-term sustainability perspective and how we manage the implementation over time. And a lot of courses within this category fall under a similar type of categorization or description, I should say. Okay, the next course is Android implementation. Okay, and we described the Android configuration course in the DHIS2 configuration category. Now, within this domain and program management category, we have a separate Android implementation course, And what we touched on or will touch on implementation considerations in that Android Configuration Academy. In the Android Implementation course, we talk about this in much more detail, right? So now we're taking a lot of those concepts around scaling up our system with a focus on Android, okay? So, we had that intro planning and budgeting DHIS2 course that was just presented. That was our online course. And now we have this Android implementation course that looks at specifically the considerations around implementing Android in your setting, right? So we describe some of the features, describe the roadmap, but then we also look at some of the specific considerations for implementing Android in your own setting. We don't necessarily go through detailed configuration steps in this course, but we want people to understand, what are the kind of considerations for when you're introducing all these mobile devices? How do you manage those? What are some considerations you need to make in your budget? What are some of the steps you need to have in place to make sure that you can update those devices on a regular basis, etc. So it's much more about those types of considerations in this course. So our target audience, and they're all optional again, it's the same type of idea with the Android configuration course. If you have an Android implementation or if you're planning one in the near future, then this course could be relevant. If you're not really managing a mobile implementation, then there's probably not too much relevance for this particular course in your context. Okay? And the prerequisite is just the intro to DHIS2 course. You don't have to know anything so specific about configuration in this course. Okay, so similar to the Android implementation management course that was just presented, we also have a course for Tracker, okay? And this looks at specifically how you manage a long-term, robust, sustainable Tracker implementation over time, okay? And we don't really focus here on any type of configuration or use of the data or data entry or data collection. We saw we already had courses that do that, right? So we have our Tracker data capture and analysis fundamentals and our Tracker configuration courses in the DHIS2 Use and DHIS2 Configuration categories, respectively. But in this specific course, it's more kind of, once again, management of that Tracker implementation, right? So around governance, capacity building, specific considerations around how people access the data, security considerations, outlining your requirements, and kind of defining those well and getting those implemented to fit your needs, okay? So the prerequisites for this, it's just the intro to DHIS2 course once again, because there's no specific DHIS2 skills or knowledge required, just an understanding of what DHIS2 is. Okay? The target audience is the operational leads, implementers, trainers, and program managers, with the trainer being optional depending on what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. The next course within this category is called Implementing Integrated Information Systems. So this is a fairly new course that was introduced in 2023. Okay. The focus on this course is basically discussing how you can actually implement an integrated information system in your own context and what that actually means. So, we're kind of considering here multiple data sources and, what types of data DHIS2 can cater to, what types of data might be suitable for other systems. We talk a little bit about how you can define your HIS architecture, how you fit DHIS2 into that, and just understanding, how broadly speaking, what your kind of architecture looks like. And within this course, while we're discussing DHIS2, actually most of the principles are just about introducing an information system or managing an information system that's been implemented, where DHIS2 is the tool that we've chosen, but a lot of the information that we're discussing here could be applied to realistically any other information system as well. We're just kind of talking about good governance principles, how to manage multiple data sources, and some of the other principles that are actually kind of introduced in that planning and budgeting DHIS2 implementation course. But here we go into, quite a bit more detail on some of those concepts. We have a number of different exercises and learning tools to facilitate discussion around this, to help you define, well, what is my vision for my integrated system in my own context? Okay. So the prerequisites for this is the Introduction to DHIS2 course. Once again, no specific configuration or need for understanding how data is collected or analyzed is required for this course. And the target audience is a bit more broad. We have the operational leads, implementers and trainers, subject matter experts depending on your context, and program managers. Okay, so we've discussed kind of the three courses within that program management divide in this category. The next three courses will focus on the domain management side of courses in this category. Okay, so the first one we have is Community Health Information Systems, or CHIS for short. And you'll see a lot of acronyms on here. I'll just describe them briefly. Okay, so CHW means Community Health Worker. PHC is Primary Healthcare Center, or Primary Healthcare. Okay, and then you'll see HMIS, which is the Health Management Information System. Okay, so what we're looking at is specifically, so this one is specific to health, and we are looking at concepts related to DHIS2 use at the community health worker level. Okay, so we're kind of looking at how do we apply DHIS2 within a CHIS. How is it utilized? What are some of the best practices associated with this? Okay. We look at kind of defining all the terms associated with this. We look at, how a CHIS differentiates from your kind of routine data collection at the facility level. What are some of the extra principles associated with working with those community health workers and why that is different. And then, get into some of the tools and configuration principles and best practices that are involved in setting up a successful CHIS. So the prerequisites for this course are the Aggregate Data Analysis Fundamentals. So this is our online course, okay? So visualizing data in DHIS2 builds on that course, but is not a prerequisite necessarily for this course. You will, however, discuss some of the outputs of CHIS data, in particular, specific indicators and dashboards that are associated with CHIS guidance and how to interpret those and what they mean in terms of the context of a community health program. So the target audience for this, they're all optional because it depends, once again, on the context. If you're using another system to manage your community health data, then it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to attend this particular academy. But if you're planning to or already are using DHIS2 to manage your community health data, then this would make more sense for the different target audience members to attend this academy. And we have the operational lead, implementer, and program manager. So the next course we have in this category is DHIS2 for education. Okay. So this looks at specifically applying the concepts of DHIS2 within the education sector. So there's a number of specific concepts that are discussed, report cards, attendance, school lists, etc. Okay. So we're really focusing on, so EMIS is for Education Management Information Systems here, and looking at applying DHIS2 to those education systems, right? So understanding how DHIS2 functionalities can be applied within the education sector. So that includes data capture, analysis, presentation of data, some of the configuration principles that are associated with kind of managing programs, data sets, other types of pieces of the configuration for education specifically. And because this is a bit of a new sector that we're working with, there's a lot of community building and engagement that's often included in this particular course as well. So this is context dependent, once again, and that's just because, whether or not you're considering using DHIS2 for education, would determine if people would be appropriate to attend this particular course. Okay, but we do have the operational lead, implementer, and program manager that we recommend to attend this course if you are considering using DHIS2 for education. The prerequisites for this are just our Intro to DHIS2 course. You'll come in and then we'll show you, some of the principles that we use to apply DHIS2 in this education domain. So the last course in this domain and program management category is DHIS2 for logistics. So this looks at covering or applying DHIS2 for logistics data, okay? For stock data, etc., and how this operates as a last mile logistics system. So one thing that we should note for this, DHIS2 does not look to necessarily replace a full logistics system, but the idea is to show you how DHIS2 can be applied to manage your last mile logistics for this. And I see the description here is incorrect. I apologize for that. I'll have to update that shortly. Okay, but just so you understand what this course is about, we're applying the logistics, the DHIS2 for logistics information, looking at monthly reporting of stock, equipment life cycles, looking at product verification and product catalogs, defining, where DHIS2 could be used to support logistics data, and where, maybe other systems are more appropriate. Understanding some of the various features that support LMIS, including LMIS's logistics management information systems. And this includes some of the basic configuration concepts, behind setting up your logistics data. And also understanding how DHIS2 fits with other LMIS tools, because we do suggest that you use other tools for a lot of different operations. So integration of DHIS2 and these systems is also discussed. Okay, so the prerequisites for this course are the aggregate fundamentals courses: data capture and validation, and data analysis. So the aggregate customization course is not required. There's not a lot of customization discussion that happens here, but it's much more of a focus of using those LMIS features and showcasing, how they work within DHIS2. The target audience are operational leads, implementers, and program managers, and these are marked as optional, once again, depending on if you're considering using DHIS2 to manage your last mile logistics, or if you're not necessarily using DHIS2 to serve that purpose, would determine if it's appropriate for them to attend this particular academy. Okay, so another category we have here is our architecture and extensions courses. So we've just finished the domain and program management one, and now we're looking at the architecture and extensions courses. So these courses focus on supplementary tools or processes outside of the core user interface in DHIS2. So you could be doing something entirely outside of DHIS2. You could be doing something using the DHIS2 API. You could be using scripts or other tools or other software in order to implement something you need to supplement what's inside of DHIS2's core features. So the first course we have in this category is our system management course. This is also a relatively new course that was introduced towards the end of 2023. And this is what we consider our next level of core team training. You learn advanced configuration concepts associated with scaling DHIS2. There's a large focus on this course on utilizing the API, utilizing other tools and software to supplement the processes within DHIS2. So managing metadata, moving it from dev to production, importing data, you might have to transform that data. Using the API itself, we provide a bit of an introduction here in utilizing the API, discussing some of the limitations of the maintenance and import-export app, demonstrating more detail on managing users and applying sharing, demonstrating how to update existing organization units, and demonstrating how to assess metadata over a long period of time to make sure the health of your system is correct. All right. So because we're using a lot of supplementary tools in order to perform these operations, it's included in this architecture and extensions category. So the prerequisites are optimizing data access and outputs, right? So this was looking at configuring our system for data use. Okay. And then we have the tracker configuration course as well. Okay. But you also have to have some background with utilizing the DHIS2 API. So there is a screening test associated with this course, and you have to pass that before you would be accepted for this, because without that background knowledge, it will be difficult to be successful in this academy. So the target audience for this course are implementers, trainers, security experts, and app developers. And the ones that are marked as optional are there just once again, depending on the context of your implementation. And the next course in this category is server administration. So this covers server administration and management, including the tools to manage and upgrade DHIS2 instances and apply kind of the updates to the operating system that's running DHIS2. So in this course, we look at reviewing the architecture associated with DHIS2 implementations. And we don't mean like the information systems architecture, where you're looking at, where DHIS2 fits overall within your information system. But we're looking at kind of the actual tools that are needed to kind of manage the server. Okay. Review SSH tips and tricks. And then there's a number of specific kind of tools that are discussed within this course. So using Linode, Ansible, LXD, Tomcat, PostgreSQL, Nginx, and I see Ansible's listed there twice. I'll have to modify that again. Okay, so we also discuss procedures for making backups, performing upgrades, and testing prior to deployment on the server itself. So the prerequisites for this are the Intro to DHIS2 course, just because we want people to know what DHIS2 is about. But then there's more specific requirements, and there is some screening that is done, additional screening that is done to test people's skills in working with servers. Ideally, you would have some experience managing servers, and knowledge of Linux is also required in order to take this particular course. So the target audience for this are our server admins, security experts, and optionally our app developers. And once again, that's marked as optional because it just depends on that app developer's role and whether or not they would be interacting with the server directly. The next course within this category is our integration and interoperability with DHIS2 course. So this looks at how you can integrate DHIS2 with other systems. So there's 3 specific frameworks that are discussed at the moment. This could be revised in the future, but we look at Apache Camel, the Java SDK, and Fire in order to kind of utilize those feature sets to integrate DHIS2 with other softwares or systems. Okay. There's also discussions around the strategic perspective, regarding the interoperability and what you're trying to accomplish, and also some of the other specific integration features that are available in DHIS2. So our prerequisites for this are the Intro to DHIS2 course. You don't really need to necessarily know the inner workings of DHIS2, but then there's a lot of additional requirements kind of on the other side where understanding the API is needed, and then, a general understanding of some of these technical frameworks, what Apache Camel is, what the Java SDK is, what Fire is, and how to utilize those is also required to attend this course. So the target audience for this course are our server admins, which are optional, just depending on their role, security experts, and app developers. Okay. Next course in this category is web and Android app development. So this looks at creating applications in DHIS2 for both the web-based DHIS2 application, as well as using the Android SDK in order to build Android applications. So the whole idea here is just to demonstrate how to build a high-quality, maintainable DHIS2 app, either for the web or using the SDK for Android. Okay. We also discuss how to work with translations and review the DHIS2 App Hub and how people can interact with that in order to upload their apps to the App Hub to be utilized with DHIS2. So the target audience for this are our app developers, and there's some different criteria here as well. No real knowledge of DHIS2 necessarily is required. The Intro to DHIS2 course could be useful if someone wants to have that background, but really we need some software development experience and then some specific knowledge of tools, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React at minimum. Okay, so a quick summary. So I went through those rather quickly, I know, but we do have a number of different courses that we've divided into a number of different categorizations. So we have 6 new categories, and this covers a total of around, I believe, 24 course types. Okay, so we have the Intro to DHIS2 category. It encompasses just the Intro to DHIS2 course. We have our DHIS2 Use category that's identified in purple in this slide. That has 6 courses within this category. There is a kind of natural progression of requirements within this category. We then have the DHIS2 Configuration category. This has a total of 5 courses that's identified in the green color. Okay, we have a mix of online courses and in-person courses available in this category. We have Domain and Program Management. That consists of 7 total courses, and that is a mix of kind of this domain management where we're looking at applying DHIS2 to a specific domain or sector like CHIS, education, and logistics, and this program management track, which looks more at kind of managing a sustainable system over time with considerations given to governance, work planning, capacity building, etc. Okay. We then have the category in yellow, okay, architecture and extensions, right? This is looking at courses that are kind of supplementary to the internal DHIS2 processes. So you're not necessarily using the DHIS2 user interface. You might be using another app, another tool. You might be writing scripts or creating an app of your own. Okay? And then we have this conferences category, which I didn't break down individually, but I think that was self-explanatory when I introduced it at the beginning. Right? So this is the new structure that we're introducing across all of our DHIS2 courses and academies. And we hope that this will lead to kind of a generally an easier understanding of how things fit together. Because you can see we have a lot of different course offerings at the moment, and it can get a little confusing as to how this all fits together, what the different requirements are, which courses should a person take. And we're hoping through the standardization of the courses and the classifications, as well as our intended target audience, using our core team members for that, and having people define their core teams and countries so they can, follow up with those individuals, assess their outcomes, make sure they're on the right track in terms of increasing their own knowledge and skills. We're hoping that this will kind of help kind of moving forward for people to define their learning pathways and get the learning outcomes they need in their own context. Okay, so the last thing I'll just talk about real quick is the revised scheduling process. All right, so the whole idea here behind this new scheduling process is that we release our academies well in advance. All right, so if I just open this up real quick, I'll just go to our scheduling page. You can see here for the year, we have quite a few academies listed on the page. The registration isn't always open immediately, but the dates are available. So you can see here we have academies listed up until November. Now this academy schedule will be revised, in particular for the second half of the year. There will be more courses introduced, but the main idea here is that we will provide you with these course schedules well in advance so you can plan your own participation. Okay, you'll see the different types of categorizations that I identified in the presentation used to define, which category it belongs to. And then, if I open up the registration page, just like I showed real quick earlier, the intended audience is being identified based on those categorizations within the core team that we've described. Okay, so we'll try to kind of make sure this is as up to date as possible. We'll try to release these courses as far in advance as we can. And we'll try to make sure that people can see when they're going to happen so they can plan around for their own internal teams and make sure that they can participate in those courses that they feel are relevant to the people in their own context. Okay, So yeah, I know I'm a bit over time here. I'm going to end the presentation there. If there are any questions, I'm happy to stick around. If there aren't, then we'll stop for now. Thank you everyone for your time today.
Perfect. Thanks, Georgia. Just to remind people of to let people know as well, this course breakdown will be available on our YouTube channel with each of the individual segments available. They should be around tomorrow afternoon European time. I'll just pause the recording there, and unless there's any questions, we'll close it down then.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.